Hey guys, welcome back to this series about inventories. In this short video, we will be talking about how to move items within your inventory from one slot to another. This will be actually very short because all we have to do is to add a drag and drop system that allows us to drag an item to a different slot. And we need to add a few methods within the inventory singleton just to allow us to move the items within the list. But now what I want to do is to actually extend the inventory singleton that we did in the previous video. So if you are just dropping in right now, there's another video which is about how to make the fundamentals of an inventory. You'll find the link. I actually want to create a move item method, right? So the move item method is actually very simple. What we need to do is to provide to the function two things: the coordinates of the slot we are coming from and the coordinates of the slot we are going to. Since we are using a list, it is two indexes, right? Because we have a linear scaling. Right now, I will warn you, we will actually call a method that don't exist yet because we will create it right after we create the move item. And this method is swap items. Because the thing we actually want to do is to check that if there is an item in a destination that we're looking at, we will have actually to swap the item's position if we do want to swap the position. If you don't, then instead of calling on the swap position, you actually return and not proceed to do anything with the move item function. In this method, we actually only care for the situation where the destination slot is empty. When this is the case, all we have to do is to set the destination slot value to the previous item and make sure that we remove the item from the slot we come from. Now that we have this method that allows us to swap to move the item, we actually want to create the next one, which will allow us to swap if there is an item in the second slot. So here we have the second method, which is swap items. So basically, since we want to swap the positions, we actually need a third variable to store one of the two when we actually make the change. This is necessary, right? When you want to swap two items, you need 3 slots. So that's it. That's all we have to change within the inventory singleton that we created in the previous video. And now we can actually move to the user interface and add everything we need for the drag and drop thing to happen. So right there, this is the scene of the component inventory slot. What we will do is actually make the drag and drop system on the entire component so that we can drag and drop from one component to another component. Implementing drag and drop in Godot is actually very easy. We use built-in methods which come from control nodes in order to basically extract some data from one node, move it while we're dragging, and then we can check if the, receiver will accept the data. And if the receiver will accept the data, we can actually do things when the data is being dropped in. So this will be probably easier to understand with the methods. We will just create the 3 built-in methods, empty, just so that we can see. The first one is get drag data. The second one is can drop data. And the third one is drop data. So here are the 3 functions. So we have errors because those functions return things, which we didn't do, but it doesn't matter yet. As I said, we have the first method, which is get drag data, which will extract the data from the object. We have the can drop data that will check if we can drop it, and then we have the drop data, which will do something when we drop some data in it. So the very first method, get drag data, will actually return the data that we want to drag. This is the first thing it does. So what we're going to do basically is simply just check that if we have not item, then we want to return null, but actually it's even, well, yes, if not item, we want to return null. Because basically, when you return null within this method, it means that you can't drag anything, basically. So if there is no item, you can't drag. That's the point. However, if there is an item, we actually want to return here the index. I will return the index of the slot, because with that index we can actually retrieve the item within it. But here, all that matters for the sake of the inventory user interface is the actual index. If we actually look at this, open the thing, yeah, we still have this problem. So let's not do that, but we don't see anything visual when we drag, okay? We have the data within the cursor, but we can't see anything visual. So there is the opportunity to actually add a preview, which is basically a control node that will be added to the cursor, which will follow the drag. So what we will do is create basically a preview node that we will attach to the cursor by using another built-in method. So here is the complete method. We do create a texture rectangle node. We just set a few settings for it, and we add it to the preview of the drag and drop by using this set drag preview. Now the second function, which is can drop data, will return either true or false if we can drop the data within the slot. Here, I'm gonna return false and show you within the application. What can happen basically is that you can get an item, drag it, and drop it back into its own slot. So why it shouldn't basically create any problem to swap it, move it. It's actually something we want to just not do to avoid unnecessary calculation. So we will just check that the index of the item that we are dragging is different than the index of the slot where we want to drop it. We will return false if the data, here data is the index that we get from the other method. We want to check if this is equal to the index of the actual slot. And if it is not, then we can return true and actually allow the dropping. Here, what may tricky to understand if you're not so familiar with object-oriented programming. Even though this is the same script, it is actually two different instances which are meant to here receive the data and here emit the data. So both slots will have their own instance of those methods, and basically the first one will emit index 1 and the second one will receive index 1, but it's in the same script. Don't worry about it. Now we can successfully drag our item between lines. There's those little blank space in between, but that's okay. And here I actually can't drag it back into its own cell, which just does nothing. So now we need simply to just use the logic for the drop data. When we drop data here, we actually don't have much to do because we actually created all the logic already within the inventory in the singleton, right? Which is in the line of we do separate the logic from the interface. Okay, so here all we have to do is just to call on the move item method. Okay, so simply all we have to do is to use the data of the drag and the index of the slot, which is receiving the drag, and there we go. So now, just with that, we should actually be able to drag and drop the items, and when it's landing in a slot, they should actually either move or swap. So here we can move this word here, we can create a few items, we can move this word here, and actually swap the items properly. So that's it. This is how you actually create the most simple drag and drop system for an inventory with dedicated slots, right? Because if you use an inventory which will actually use which will actually use the auto sorting of the list, if I dare say it this way, but anyway. I will not expand further on how to do things like having equipment slots, which will, for example, receive either the weapons or the shield or the armors. This is actually not too hard to do if this is something you need. By tinkering with the three functions that we used, which are can drop data, and get drag data, you can actually make sure that, for example, if the inventory slot is an equipment slot for a specific type of item, you can check that the data within the drag is matching that type of item, right? So this is something you can do. So anyway, I hope you like this. Actually, I'm glad that this video is shorter than the previous one, because it was just, it's a lot to handle, so sometimes shorter videos are easier on you, I guess. So yeah, that's it for me. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in another one later on. See ya.